On December 24, 1971, a Lockheed L-188 Electra departed Lima and turned east toward the interior of Peru. The aircraft carried 92 people. Its route crossed the Andes before descending toward the lowland rainforest near Pucallpa. Below that flight path stretched one of the largest continuous forests on Earth. The Amazon basin in eastern Peru is a vast system of rivers, floodplains, and dense canopy. From above, the forest appears uniform. The treetops form a textured surface of green, broken only by winding brown rivers and occasional clearings. There are few roads. Settlements are scattered and often reachable only by boat or small aircraft. In 1971, large areas remained difficult to access even for trained search teams. December marks the beginning of the rainy season. Moist air rises in the afternoon heat and builds into towering storm systems. Lightning is common. Storm cells develop quickly and can cover wide areas of sky. Aircraft flying east from Lima must pass through shifting weather patterns before reaching the jungle lowlands. Among the passengers that day was a 17-year-old German-Peruvian student named Julianne Koepke. She was traveling with her mother on LANSA Flight 508, a routine domestic flight scheduled to land before evening. By late afternoon, the aircraft was approaching the storm line forming over the forest. The aircraft continued eastward from Lima on a route regularly flown by Líneas Aéreas Nacionales S.A., known as LANSA. The airline had operated domestic routes across Peru throughout the 1960s and early 1970s. Air travel connected the capital to remote regions separated by mountains and forest. For many passengers, it was the only practical way to move between the coast and the interior. Among them was Julianne Koepke, born in Lima in 1954 to German parents. Her father, Hans Wilhelm Koepke, was a zoologist. Her mother, Maria Koepke, was an ornithologist. Both had relocated to Peru for scientific research. They worked extensively in the Amazon basin, studying wildlife and establishing a research station known as Panguana near the Rio Uyapichis. Julianne spent much of her childhood between Lima and the rainforest. She became familiar with tropical ecology at an early age. Time at the research station exposed her to the structure of the forest, its layered canopy, its insects, its birds, and the seasonal patterns of rain and flood. She observed how rivers served as natural corridors through otherwise dense terrain. She learned basic field awareness from her parents, though she had no formal survival training. In December 1971, Julianne had completed her final exams at the German school in Lima. She and her mother planned to spend Christmas with her father at Panguana. Her father had already traveled ahead. Julianne and her mother booked seats on LANSA Flight 508 for December 24. The flight was scheduled to depart in the morning but was delayed. By the time it left Lima, weather conditions over the Andes and the jungle were developing into seasonal storms. Maria Koepke had professional experience flying over remote regions. As a field scientist, she understood the logistical challenges of working in isolated areas. Julianne, at 17, had already made numerous flights across Peru. Air travel did not seem unusual. The journey was part of a familiar pattern, city to forest, coast to river. LANSA itself had faced scrutiny in previous years. Earlier accidents had raised concerns about maintenance and safety standards, though commercial flights continued to operate. Passengers boarding that afternoon had little immediate reason to expect disaster. The Lockheed Electra was a 4-engine turboprop aircraft designed for medium-range routes. It was widely used around the world. As the plane crossed the Andes, cloud formations thickened. Afternoon convective storms built rapidly over the eastern slopes. Meteorological reports from that day confirmed severe weather activity along the flight path. Lightning activity increased as the aircraft descended toward lower altitude. Inside the cabin, passengers prepared for arrival. It was Christmas Eve. Many were traveling to reunite with family. The aircraft entered dense cloud as it approached the jungle airspace east of the mountains. At approximately 4:36 p.m., while flying at an altitude of about 21,000 feet, the aircraft encountered extreme turbulence within a thunderstorm system. At approximately 4:36 p.m., LANSA Flight 508 was flying through a developing thunderstorm over the Peruvian rainforest. The aircraft had descended from cruising altitude and was navigating dense cloud formations. Lightning activity in the area was intense. According to the official investigation, a bolt of lightning struck the aircraft's right wing. The impact ignited fuel vapors inside the wing tank. Within seconds, an explosion tore through the structure. The right wing separated from the fuselage. The aircraft broke apart in midair. Witnesses on the ground later reported seeing fragments falling from the clouds. Portions of the fuselage descended into the forest below. The tail section and sections of cabin structure separated at high altitude. Most passengers were still strapped into their seats. Julianne Coep remained fastened to her seat when the aircraft disintegrated. She later reported that she saw the open sky above her as the plane broke apart. Then she began to fall. Still secured to a row of 3 seats, she dropped from an estimated altitude of roughly 10,000 feet after separation from the main fuselage. The exact altitude remains uncertain, but it was high enough for the descent to last several minutes. The seat assembly rotated as it fell. Dense forest canopy lay below. The impact site was later identified deep within the Amazon rainforest in the department of Loreto. The forest canopy may have broken the fall by absorbing part of the impact energy. Branches and foliage slowed the descent before she struck the ground. Julianne survived the fall. Many others did not. The crash killed 91 of the 92 people on board, including her mother. Julianne was the only survivor. When she regained consciousness, she was alone in the forest. When Julianne Coep regained consciousness, it was daylight. She was still strapped to part of the seat assembly. The wreckage around her was fragmented. Sections of the aircraft had fallen across a wide area of forest. The canopy overhead filtered the light. Rain fell intermittently. She had sustained a concussion. Her right clavicle was fractured. A deep laceration ran along her right arm. One eye was swollen nearly shut. She had lost a shoe. Despite these injuries, she was able to stand. There was no immediate sign of other survivors. The forest floor was dense with vegetation. Fallen branches and debris lay scattered around the impact site. Julianne called out for her mother but received no response. She located a small bag of candy among the wreckage. It was the only usable supply she found. Search operations began within hours of the crash. Aircraft flew over the general region where radar contact had been lost. Dense canopy made visibility from the air extremely limited. Wreckage beneath intact forest cover was difficult to detect. After several days, aerial searches were reduced. Julianne understood that remaining in place offered little chance of being seen from above. From her time at the Panguana Research Station, she knew that watercourses often led to human settlements. Rivers served as transport routes in the Amazon. She decided to walk until she found moving water. Her injuries limited her speed. She moved slowly, often stopping to rest. Rain fell daily. The wet season had begun. Clothing remained damp. Insects were constant. Mosquitoes gathered in exposed areas of skin. The open wound on her arm attracted flies. On the first day, she located a small stream. The water flowed in a consistent direction. She chose to follow it downstream. The stream widened gradually, merging with other channels. The terrain was uneven. Roots, mud, and submerged branches made walking unstable. She often waded directly through shallow water to avoid dense undergrowth. Her knowledge of the forest was basic but practical. She did not attempt to eat unfamiliar plants. She consumed pieces of candy sparingly. After the candy was gone, she relied on stream water. She avoided stagnant pools and chose flowing sections when possible. At night, she slept on the ground. She did not construct shelter. Rain continued. Temperatures remained warm, but constant moisture weakened her condition. Her injured collarbone limited the use of her right arm. The wound along that arm became increasingly painful. Several times, she believed she heard aircraft overhead. She later reported hearing search planes during the first days after the crash. Dense canopy and cloud cover likely prevented pilots from seeing her. The sound passed each time without change. On the fourth day, she encountered the bodies of other passengers. The remains lay near sections of wreckage embedded in the forest floor. She searched briefly for signs of life but found none. She continued downstream. Her physical condition declined gradually. The cut on her arm showed signs of infection. Maggots appeared in the wound. Though disturbing, their presence limited deeper tissue decay by consuming damaged flesh. She did not attempt to remove them at that stage. She crossed small tributaries by wading. In deeper sections, she swam short distances using her left arm. She avoided large river channels where current was strong. Her remaining sandal loosened and was eventually lost. She continued barefoot. Days passed without clear markers of time. She later reconstructed the duration as 11 days based on known dates. During the ordeal, she marked time only by cycles of light and darkness. She did not attempt to climb trees or signal aircraft. The forest canopy was too high and dense. Movement required steady concentration. Slipping on submerged wood could result in further injury. She prioritized maintaining forward direction along the water. Food was nearly absent. She found no fruit within reach. Fish were visible in the streams but could not be caught by hand. Her calorie intake remained extremely low. Weakness increased. On approximately the 9th day, she found a boat tied along a larger stream bank. Nearby stood a small shelter used by local lumber workers. The structure was unoccupied at that moment. Inside, she located a container of gasoline. Recalling basic field knowledge, she poured gasoline onto her infected wound to kill larvae. The treatment was painful but effective in removing maggots from the surface tissue. She rested at the shelter. The following day, several Peruvian lumbermen returned to the site. They discovered Julianne near the shelter. Initially uncertain of her identity, they provided food and basic care. She was severely underweight, dehydrated, and infected, but conscious and able to communicate. Because the area lacked road access, the men transported her by canoe along the river network to a small settlement. From there, she was eventually flown to a hospital in Pucallpa. Medical staff treated her infections and fractures. She remained hospitalized for several weeks. She later assisted search teams by identifying the approximate crash location based on her memory of the river path. Official reports confirmed that she was the sole survivor of the accident. Her 11-day walk through the Amazon rainforest remains one of the most documented cases of survival following high-altitude aircraft disintegration. By the time the lumbermen found Julianne Coepque, her condition reflected sustained exposure rather than sudden collapse. 11 days in the rainforest had reduced her weight and strength. Dehydration had been partially offset by stream water, but food had been almost non-existent. The infection in her right arm had advanced. The fractured clavicle remained untreated. In the hospital at Pucallpa, physicians documented her injuries. The collarbone fracture required immobilization. The laceration on her arm was cleaned and treated with antibiotics. Insects had entered the wound during her days in the forest. Medical staff removed remaining larvae and monitored tissue damage. She also showed signs of shock and concussion consistent with high-impact trauma. Search teams continued to look for additional survivors during the days following the crash. Reports indicate that several passengers initially survived the breakup but later died from injuries sustained in the fall. The wreckage field was scattered across a wide area of forest, making coordinated recovery difficult. Dense canopy concealed debris from aerial view. Many sections were located only after ground teams moved through the region on foot. Julianne learned of her mother's death after her rescue. Maria Koepke had survived the initial fall but succumbed to her injuries several days later. Her body was located during subsequent searches. The loss was confirmed through official identification. The crash of LANSA Flight 508 became one of the deadliest lightning-related aviation disasters in recorded history. Investigations concluded that the aircraft had flown directly into a severe thunderstorm system despite known meteorological risks. Structural failure following a lightning strike led to midair disintegration. Safety concerns surrounding the airline intensified, and LANSA ceased operations shortly afterward. For Julianne, recovery extended beyond physical healing. After her release from the hospital, she returned temporarily to Germany before later resuming her education in Peru. In time, she pursued biology, following the professional path of her parents. She eventually earned a doctorate in zoology and returned to work in the Peruvian rainforest. The 11 days she spent alone in the Amazon did not transform into public spectacle. She rarely gave interviews in the immediate aftermath. When she did speak, her descriptions remained consistent with documented records. She followed water downstream, conserved energy, and relied on knowledge gained during childhood at a remote research station. Her survival was not the result of a single decisive act. It was the accumulation of small, practical decisions made under injury and isolation. On the 11th day after the crash, Julianne Koepke encountered a small group of local lumbermen along a tributary of the Rio Coca. These men were working in the rainforest, harvesting timber in areas accessible only by river. Their arrival at the shelter was coincidental. They had no knowledge of the crash prior to that moment. The lumbermen initially observed a figure moving slowly along the bank. Upon closer inspection, they recognized her as a young woman in distress. They provided immediate assistance, offering food and water. Her injuries were evident: the right arm laceration, swollen eye, and fractured clavicle. They carefully supported her as she moved to a more stable location. Because the area lacked road access, transport required a canoe along connected rivers. The lumbermen guided her downstream to the nearest settlement capable of medical care. At each stage, they ensured she had water and minimal protection from rain. The journey to Pucallpa took several hours along narrow, meandering channels. Upon arrival in the town, Julianne was transferred to the local hospital. Medical staff documented her condition, treated infections, and stabilized fractures. Her physical recovery began in earnest, though her injuries and malnourishment required extended care. The encounter with the lumbermen was the turning point in her survival. Without their timely discovery and assistance, the remaining days of exposure, infection, and exhaustion could have proved fatal. The medical evacuation that followed ensured that she survived the aftermath of the crash. Her rescue marked the conclusion of the 11-day ordeal. No dramatic celebrations followed. The process was procedural and factual: discovery, immediate care, transfer to hospital, medical treatment. Julianne Koepke's survival was recorded in aviation history as the only instance of a person surviving a midair aircraft breakup at high altitude over dense rainforest. Official investigations of LANSA Flight 508 confirmed that she was the sole survivor of 92 passengers and crew. The crash highlighted vulnerabilities in aircraft operations during severe weather and underscored the difficulty of search and rescue in remote forested regions. In the years following the accident, Julianne returned to the Amazon basin as a biologist, continuing the work her parents had begun. She contributed to research stations and field studies while maintaining the factual account of her experience. She provided testimony to authorities and scientific organizations, describing the conditions of her fall, the terrain she navigated, and the steps she took to survive. Her story has become a reference in survival studies, particularly concerning isolated environments and the role of prior knowledge in extreme circumstances. It also remains a sobering example of human vulnerability in high-altitude aviation accidents and the resilience of an individual with practical skills, determination, and situational awareness. The rainforest reclaimed the site of the crash. Trees and undergrowth return to conceal the wreckage. Silence now covers the area, leaving only the record of events and the enduring testament of a singular survival.